one of the few members of Congress who was able to question Robert Mueller in both of today's House hearings.
1,000 former prosecutors who served under Republican and Democratic administrations with 12,000 years of federal service wrote a letter regarding the president's conduct. Are you familiar with that letter?
I've read about that letter, yes.
And some of the individuals who signed that letter, the statement of former prosecutors, are people you worked with. Is that right?
Quite probably, yes.
People that you respect?
Quite probably, yes.
And in that letter, they said all of this conduct, trying to control and impede the investigation against the president by leveraging his authority over others, is similar to conduct we have seen charged against other public officials and people in powerful positions. Are they wrong?
They have a different case.
Do you want to sign that letter, Director Mueller?
They have a different case.
Director Mueller, thank you for your service.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell from California. Thank you very much for joining us tonight after this busy day, Congressman. You were one of the lucky ones who was in both hearings. That was from the first hearing. I just want to get your general overall reaction to what you experienced in both of those hearing rooms today.
As you pointed out, Lawrence, we brought a very prepared team to both hearings that expected the director to stay within the four sides of his report and not to deviate from that. So we were ready to refer him to different pieces. And I think at the end of the day, the American people saw Russia attacked us. They sought to help Donald Trump. Donald Trump welcomed it and planned for it. And when he became president, he went to great lengths to cover it up. And only because of his own department's policies is he shielded in a way that no one else in America is shielded from being charged with a crime.
I want to go to an exchange you had with Robert Mueller in the Intelligence Committee about the number of people who have been caught up in this investigation. Let's listen to that.
National Security Advisor Flynn lied about discussions with Russian ambassador related to sanctions. Is that right?
That's correct.
Michael Cohen lied to this committee about Trump Tower Moscow. Is that correct?
Yes.
George Papadopoulos, the president's senior foreign policy advisor, lied to the FBI about his communications about Russia's possession of dirt on Hillary Clinton. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
The president's campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, lied about meetings that he had with someone with ties to Russian intelligence. Is that correct?
That's true.
And your investigation was hampered by Trump campaign officials' use of encryption communications. Is that right?
We believe that to be the case.
Congressman, that last question about how the investigation was hampered by the use of encryption goes to something that other members of the committees brought out at different points, which is there were limits to what Robert Mueller could find out. There were roadblocks. There were successful elements of obstruction of justice that prevented the Mueller investigation from discovering some evidence.
That's right. He also describes in his report that destruction of evidence, lying, tampering, and obstructing created gaps. And so the president says there's no collusion, there's no conspiracy. But in America, we don't reward people if they bury the evidence so deep beneath the earth that investigators can never find it. We have a separate crime for that, and that's obstruction. Now, again, this president was shielded from being charged with obstruction. Others were not, and they were charged with obstruction. But he has laid out a roadmap for how we can hold the president accountable. And the only way to do that is through the impeachment process.
I want to go to one of the classic questions of the day, I think, in which Robert Mueller doesn't answer the question, but you can see that the answer is there. And that's in the question about the credibility of the president asked by
Val Demings.
Val Demings. We're going to go to that right now.
Could you say, Director Mueller, that the president was credible?
I can't answer that question.
Director Mueller, isn't it fair to say that the president's written answers were not only inadequate and incomplete because he didn't answer many of your questions, but where he did, his answer showed that he wasn't always being truthful?
I would say, generally.
And Congressman, to be contrasted with, Robert Mueller was willing to say that some other witnesses were credible.
That's right. He said that Michael Cohen and Rick Gates were credible. So that was essentially a very careful prosecutor saying that if I could call the president credible, I would call him credible.
Yes, and that's one of the things about this particular hearing with the limits that Robert Mueller accepted from the Justice Department. His answers had to be interpreted more than they might otherwise. And what was your reaction at the beginning of the judiciary hearing where you heard him say that he was going to accept the limitations that were suggested to him by the Justice Department in that letter he received this week?
That he's a patriot, that he follows rules, even when he's investigating a president who doesn't. And as frustrating as that was, we were going to do all we could to get the information that we needed. And I think we did that today. Today you saw Act One. He laid out all the witnesses that we need to now bring in who were front row percipient witnesses. But also, you should step back and realize if the president had nothing to hide, he would do two things. First, he would lift the DOJ policy that says a sitting president can't be indicted and say, if I truly committed a crime, bring it. I'm so confident that I didn't. He's never going to do that. And second, he would not tell the Attorney General or Mueller to restrict their testimony. He would say, ask him anything you want, and he can answer anything he wants. I didn't do anything wrong. He did neither, which goes to his consciousness of guilt.
Well, the most important testimony that was restricted was Donald Trump's own refusal to testify about in the obstruction of justice investigation.
And Lawrence, from January 2017 until March 2019, when the investigation ended, Donald Trump met in person with Vladimir Putin 6 times. He exchanged 10 phone calls with him and 4 letters. He met with Robert Mueller 0 times. Again, that goes to who this president prioritizes, a dictator who sought to interfere in our elections over the person seeking to protect our country from that attack.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you very much for joining us at the end of this very long day for you. Really appreciate your work today and joining us today. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.